Dirty Harry Callahan. Harry Callahan, played by Clint Eastwood, emerged as the cinematic embodiment of uncompromising justice in Dirty Harry. He was not a traditional detective bound by the system's rules, but a figure who treated the legal code as an obstacle when it stood in the way of punishing criminals. Callahan's motivation is rooted in an absolute belief that victims deserve justice, even if delivering it requires bending or breaking the law. His Marine background, his devastating marksmanship with his Smith & Wesson Model 2944 Magnum, and his moniker of Dirty Harry all reinforce the image of a man perpetually assigned the toughest and most unpleasant cases. The film's climactic confrontation with the Scorpio Killer, where Callahan throws his badge into the water after executing the criminal, symbolized his contempt for a system that valued procedure over lives. The character's uncompromising worldview stemmed from personal tragedy. His wife had been killed by a drunk driver, a loss that deepened his hatred for leniency in the justice system. This loss is never sentimentalized in the film, but lingers beneath his actions, helping explain his readiness to prioritize a victim's suffering over a criminal's rights. One of his defining moments comes when he tortures Scorpio to find a kidnapped girl. While illegal, the scene forces the audience into a moral dilemma, aligning them with Callahan's logic that saving a life outweighs preserving due process. His philosophy was summed up in one of cinema's most iconic lines.
Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
Clint Eastwood's involvement in shaping the character was profound. The role had been offered to Frank Sinatra, John Wayne, and Paul Newman before it got to Eastwood. However, he insisted on restoring the grittier, more controversial elements of the original script. His performance was so forceful that critics like Pauline Kael and Roger Ebert branded the film fascist, accusing it of glorifying authoritarianism. Yet, the cultural impact was undeniable. Released in the shadow of the Zodiac killings, Dirty Harry channeled public frustration with crime and bureaucracy into a vigilante fantasy that resonated nationwide. An uncommon detail about Eastwood's approach is his insistence that Harry reject the rogue death squad in Magnum Force, the sequel to Dirty Harry that came 2 years later. This showed that Callahan's brand of justice, though extreme, had limits. He would not abandon the idea of law itself. Eastwood thus crafted a character who blurred the line between savior and authoritarian, embodying the fierce debates about law and order in the 1970s. Officer John McClane. John McClane, portrayed by Bruce Willis, redefined the cinematic lawman by introducing vulnerability into a genre dominated by invincible action heroes. Unlike the muscle-bound figures of the 1980s, McClane is an everyman, a working-class New York cop struggling with a failing marriage. When he arrives in Los Angeles to reconcile with his wife Holly during her company's Christmas party, he is thrown into a terrorist siege at Nakatomi Plaza. What distinguishes McClane is not brute strength but resourcefulness and resilience. He spends the film bruised, bloodied, and terrified, crawling through air ducts, limping barefoot across broken glass, and talking to himself in moments of despair.
Down to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
This human fragility made him relatable, while his refusal to quit defined his relentless nature. McClane's defining trait is his improvisation under pressure. When cut off from help, he turns his police training and street smarts into survival tools. He uses a fire hose to leap off the rooftop, scribbles a taunting message on a dead terrorist's sweater, and relies on cunning rather than overwhelming force to defeat Hans Gruber's gang. His signature line,
"Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker,"
became not just comic relief but a defiant assertion of his will to survive against impossible odds. Unlike earlier action heroes who seemed untouchable, McClane bleeds, panics, and doubts himself, yet keeps fighting. Willis's commitment to authenticity came at a personal cost. Determined to perform his own stunts, he endured multiple injuries. During one sequence where McClane fires a gun from beneath a table, the use of unusually loud blanks caused Willis permanent partial hearing loss in his left ear. On another day, a mistimed explosion during a rooftop jump nearly sent him past the safety bag. These real risks reinforced the sense that McClane was not invincible. The danger felt immediate because Willis himself was at risk. His performance drew on his working-class background in New Jersey, adding an authenticity to McClane's cynicism and gallows humor. Beyond its action spectacle, Die Hard carried a cultural critique of the 1980s. The villains, led by Alan Rickman's Hans Gruber, were sophisticated thieves posing as terrorists, mirroring anxieties about globalized greed and foreign corporate dominance. McClane, the ordinary cop, symbolized blue-collar American resilience, standing against both corporate excess and international threats. His victory restored not just order in the skyscraper, but also reaffirmed a nostalgic vision of American grit over elitist detachment. In doing so, McClane became the first postmodern action hero, a man painfully aware of his own limitations, surviving not through strength but through sheer defiance and determination. Lieutenant Vincent Hanna. Vincent Hanna of the Los Angeles Police Department's Robbery Homicide Division is a character defined by obsession, played with manic intensity by Al Pacino in Heat. Hanna's life revolves entirely around the pursuit of criminals, particularly the disciplined thief Neil McCauley, played by Robert De Niro. He is not a balanced man. His devotion to the hunt has cost him multiple marriages and left him alienated from family and friends. Every waking moment is consumed by the chase, and Pacino plays Hanna as a man teetering on the edge of burnout, bursting with sudden outbursts and explosive energy that unsettle everyone around him. His relationships collapse because, as his third wife notes, he cannot detach from the action, the juice, a constant need to immerse himself in danger. The film's central theme is the mirrored relationship between Hanna and McCauley, presented as two professionals locked in a fatal duel. They are polar opposites in trade, cop and thief, but spiritual equals in discipline and obsession. The diner scene, where they sit face to face, is emblematic of this connection. They acknowledge that they understand each other better than anyone else, and that this understanding dooms them both. Their final confrontation on the runway, where Hanna fatally shoots McCauley yet takes his hand in respect, underscores that Hanna's victory is not triumph but the culmination of an existential need to pursue his equal until only one remains. Pacino's portrayal carries an unusual hidden detail. He based Hanna's erratic behavior on the notion that the detective was a cocaine user. This backstory, ultimately cut from the film, explained his rapid shifts from calm professionalism to near-manic shouting. The choice gave Pacino the freedom to inject volatility into the performance, exemplified in his improvised line to Hank Azaria,
"'Cause she got a great ass!"
The intensity of the delivery startled the actor in real life, capturing a genuine moment of intimidation. Pacino also drew stylistic influence from then-Lakers coach Pat Riley, adopting the slick suits and sharp hair that signaled Hanna's authority. Michael Mann reinforced authenticity by embedding Pacino with real detectives and staging the film's shootouts with military precision. The downtown gunfight's sound design was so realistic that it was later used in U.S. Marine training. Hanna, then, becomes not just a detective but a cinematic meditation on obsession. His relentless pursuit is less about law and more about identity. Without the chase, Hanna is nothing. U.S. Marshal Samuel Gerard. Samuel Gerard, played by Tommy Lee Jones, is defined not by emotion, vengeance, or even ideology, but by an unwavering commitment to process. In The Fugitive, Gerard is introduced as the head of a small team tasked with recapturing Dr. Richard Kimball, a respected Chicago surgeon wrongfully convicted of murdering his wife. Gerard operates with a cold precision that strips away moral ambiguity. When Kimball pleads his innocence during the iconic storm drain scene, Gerard's blunt reply,
"I don't care!"
encapsulates his worldview. He is not a judge or jury. His job is to enforce a court mandate, and his personal opinion of guilt or innocence is irrelevant. This refusal to be swayed by emotional appeals makes him relentless, an embodiment of the system functioning at its highest efficiency. Gerard's professionalism extends to his leadership style. Unlike many cinematic lawmen who work as lone wolves, Gerard's strength lies in his team. He manages a cohesive unit of marshals, whose improvisational banter feels authentic because Jones encouraged his co-stars to ad-lib, fostering natural camaraderie. This team dynamic makes Gerard more formidable. He coordinates tactical searches, directs manpower across sprawling landscapes, and delegates with total confidence. A memorable moment comes in the aftermath of Kimball's daring leap from the dam. Gerard calmly orders a hard target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, henhouse, outhouse, and doghouse, a line Jones reportedly delivered flatly as a protest against dialogue he disliked. Director Andrew Davis kept it, recognizing how the unenthusiastic delivery highlighted Gerard's no-nonsense character. Tommy Lee Jones built his performance on close observation of real marshals. He absorbed their jargon, their meticulous strategies, and even their dark humor. His improvisational instincts added touches of authenticity, such as calling Kimball's dam jump a Peter Pan dive, a phrase borrowed from an actual marshal. Jones won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor largely because of these choices. He took a role written as functional and elevated it into a vivid, commanding presence, a hunter whose detached clarity became unforgettable. DEA agent Norman Stansfield. Norman Stansfield, played by Gary Oldman, is one of cinema's most disturbing inversions of the lawman archetype. As a Drug Enforcement Administration agent, he carries the full authority of the state, yet he uses his badge as a weapon for sadism, corruption, and terror. Unlike other flawed or morally ambiguous cops, Stansfield is a complete perversion of justice. His violence is not motivated by duty or even greed, but by an aesthetic appreciation for chaos. He compares his massacres to classical music, particularly Beethoven, suggesting that he treats brutality as an art form. His signature line, "I take no pleasure in taking life if it's from a person who doesn't care about it," reveals a chilling philosophy. The more his victims struggle to live, the greater his satisfaction. Stansfield's unpredictability is central to his menace. He veers from calm and charming to explosive outbursts with terrifying speed, keeping both his victims and his colleagues off balance. His addiction to designer capsules that induce physical convulsions heightens this instability, making him appear almost inhuman. One of the most memorable sequences occurs when he and his men massacre an entire family, leaving only young Matilda alive. Oldman plays the scene with theatricality, sniffing Matilda's father mid-interrogation, an improvisation that generated real fear on set. This unpredictability ensured that Stansfield's presence alone created tension, as no one could anticipate his next move. Oldman's performance is legendary for its improvisational excess. The film's most famous moment, his scream of "Everyone!" when demanding reinforcements, was not scripted. Oldman delivered the line as a joke, exaggerating to amuse director Luc Besson. Instead, the take's raw insanity was kept in the final cut, becoming one of the most quoted villain lines in cinema. Behind the scenes, Stansfield was designed as a direct foil to Léon, the quiet, minimalist hitman played by Jean Reno. Where Léon is stoic and disciplined, Stansfield is flamboyant and unhinged, allowing Oldman to unleash a performance of near-operatic chaos. In the context of the 1990s, Stansfield embodied the public's growing cynicism toward government authority. He was the nightmare vision of unchecked power, a man who, with a badge and legal backing, became more dangerous than the criminals he was meant to stop. His sadism, theatricality, and corruption made him a lawman stripped of morality, an institution turned into a monster. Detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle. Detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle, portrayed by Gene Hackman, is one of the most unvarnished depictions of a lawman in cinema. In The French Connection, Doyle is not presented as a clean-cut hero, but as a deeply flawed figure, a racist, alcoholic, and womanizer who nevertheless possesses an unrelenting instinct for police work. His obsession is narcotics enforcement, and his pursuit of a major heroin ring in New York City consumes him entirely. Doyle bends rules, disregards procedure, and frequently tramples civil liberties because he believes the system itself is broken. His relentless nature mirrors the gritty urban decay of 1970s New York, a city filmed in washed-out colors, grimy streets, and bleak tenements. The ugliness of the city and the ugliness of Doyle are presented as inseparable, both products of a society in decline. The film's iconic chase sequence exemplifies Doyle's character. After French smugglers attempt to assassinate him from an elevated train, Doyle commandeers a civilian's car and barrels through congested Brooklyn streets in one of the most dangerous car chases ever filmed. He crashes into obstacles, nearly hits pedestrians, and pushes recklessly forward until he corners the assassin. The sequence illustrates his defining trait: he will accept collateral damage and risk innocent lives if it means closing in on his target. This obsessive tenacity defines him as both effective and dangerous, a cop whose victories come at immense moral cost. Hackman's performance was shaped by conflict and discomfort. Initially, he doubted his ability to play such a ruthless character, confessing to director William Friedkin that he did not think he was right for the role. To bridge the gap, Hackman immersed himself in training with the real-life detectives who inspired the film, Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso. However, Hackman openly despised Egan's casual racism and intimidation tactics, which clashed with Hackman's own temperament. Friedkin pushed him to channel that discomfort into the role, forcing Hackman to embody qualities he personally detested. The result was a performance filled with raw tension, as though Hackman himself were constantly at war with the character he portrayed. Hackman's Oscar-winning performance was not just about acting skill, but about capturing this friction. His sensitivity as a man clashed with Doyle's brutality, and that unease became the essence of the character. Rather than disappearing into the role, Hackman fought against it, creating a portrayal that was authentic precisely because it was so difficult. Doyle thus emerged as a morally compromised but brutally effective cop. Officer Bud White. Officer Wendell Bud White, portrayed by Russell Crowe, is both a blunt instrument of police violence and a deeply wounded man whose trauma shapes his moral code. In LA Confidential, White is introduced as a feared enforcer within the Los Angeles Police Department of the 1950s. His superiors use him when brute force is required, and his reputation as a meathead with a quick temper precedes him. Yet beneath his violent exterior lies a singular compulsion: protecting women from abuse. This obsession stems from childhood trauma, when his father chained him to a radiator and forced him to watch the beating death of his mother. That horror forged White into a man who unleashes violence only against men who victimize women, making his brutality paradoxically principled. White's dual nature is central to the film. To criminals and corrupt colleagues, he is a relentless predator. To women, he is unexpectedly gentle. His relationship with Lynn Bracken, a high-class prostitute portrayed by Kim Basinger, reveals this tenderness. Around her, his hardened edges soften, and he displays an almost boyish vulnerability. Their romance evolves into a redemptive love story that humanizes him and provides a counterweight to the film's pervasive corruption. One striking sequence shows White beating an abusive husband, then comforting the man's terrified wife with disarming sensitivity. These moments highlight the psychological complexity of a character who channels trauma into both savagery and compassion. Crowe's preparation for the role was transformative. At the time, he was relatively unknown in Hollywood, chosen by director Curtis Hanson after his performance in Romper Stomper. To project physical intimidation, Crowe developed a unique bulldog-like gait and deliberately confined himself to a small apartment during preparation so that he constantly felt oversized and constrained. This method gave him a sense of looming presence on screen, aligning with the novel's description of White as the largest man on the force. Critics praised his performance as revelatory, noting his ability to switch seamlessly between ferocity and tenderness, establishing him as a breakout star in American cinema. Within the broader narrative, Bud White embodies the film's neo-noir deconstruction of the classic hard-boiled detective. Where earlier noir heroes like Sam Spade were enigmatically tough, White's violence is traced directly to psychological wounds, offering a modernized, fully psychologized archetype. His arc intertwines brutality with redemption, suggesting that healing can emerge from trauma when paired with love and loyalty. In a film exposing the corruption and brutality of the LAPD alongside the rot of Hollywood celebrity culture, White's personal code sets him apart. He is deeply flawed, yet his relentless drive to protect the vulnerable makes him both terrifying and strangely noble. Martin Riggs, brought to life by Mel Gibson, stands as one of the most volatile and psychologically layered lawmen in action cinema. A former Special Forces sniper from the Vietnam War, Riggs is introduced as a cop living on the edge of self-destruction. His wife's death in a car accident has left him with a death wish, fueling reckless behavior that alarms both criminals and colleagues. Riggs is capable of extraordinary precision with firearms, yet he also dives headlong into chaos, from hurling himself off buildings with suicidal suspects to charging into gunfights with no regard for his own safety. This duality makes him unpredictable. His grief renders him dangerously unstable, but it is also the source of his effectiveness as a detective. The film presents Riggs as both unhinged and sympathetic. His loneliness is underscored by his desolate trailer on the beach, where he contemplates suicide with a hollow-point bullet before breaking down in uncontrollable sobs. Yet the same man is capable of boyish humor, watching cartoons with his dog and forming a familial bond with his partner, Roger Murtaugh. This bond becomes the emotional core of the Lethal Weapon series, turning Riggs from a man on the brink of collapse into someone with something to live for. His explosive combat skills, paired with his suicidal fearlessness, make him a uniquely dangerous cop, but his personal healing hinges on human connection rather than violence. Mel Gibson's performance elevated Riggs beyond a standard action role. The pivotal suicide attempt scene was partially improvised, with Gibson adding physical tremors, guttural sobs, and a raw collapse that shocked even director Richard Donner. Donner later said the authenticity made the scene almost unbearable to watch, grounding the character's pain in real emotional texture. Gibson's decision to embrace vulnerability alongside violence distinguished Riggs from the indestructible action archetypes of the decade. The film's massive success launched Gibson into global superstardom, showing that audiences were ready for a hero who could be both lethal and broken. Riggs, along with his partner Murtaugh, played by Danny Glover, embodied a broader cultural shift. In the 1980s buddy cop framework, his instability contrasted sharply with Murtaugh's stability as a middle-class black family man. While the film avoided addressing race directly, their bond symbolized a colorblind narrative of unity through shared military service. This framing sidestepped deeper racial realities but reinforced a conservative vision of harmony rooted in ignoring difference. Riggs thus became an emblem of the era's contradictions. His trauma-driven recklessness thrilled audiences, while his healing through partnership offered a hopeful, if simplified, resolution. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe. I've got a lot more content coming. Thanks for watching.